Hello, and welcome to Abby Lee Wellness, a place for sensitive souls to feel grounded and at ease as you learn everyday tools and insights to live your life most inspired. Hello, and welcome to today's episode on embracing your feminine in a masculine world. Today we'll talk about what even are the feminine and masculine energies, helping you to feel more in tune with your feminine, helping you to embrace your feminine, to live life with gratitude for your feminine, for the feminine, for others' femininity, helping you to even recognize what the feminine is, to see ways in which the feminine has been suppressed or out of balance, or ways in which we live in a space of a wounded feminine, ways in which we've supported or adapted to an excessively masculine way of living. So let's find ways where the feminine can rise and be celebrated and nurtured in our lives to restore balance. So I think this topic can possibly be triggering for some, or I think a better word is misunderstood. This topic can be misunderstood during times when gender roles or terminology around gender identity are being explored or challenged or changed. So no matter the human, these two energies, the feminine and the masculine, are universal energies that reside within each of us and in all beings on some sort of spectrum, regardless of gender. So we see these two opposing forces across many different forms, structures, things in nature, beliefs among cultures, and this ideology comes from ancestral teachings, ways of living and seeing our world that has been passed on for thousands and thousands of years to help people fulfill their purpose, for people to have harmony and balance within themselves, within their intimate relationships, and within their community as a whole. Like in Chinese culture, we see these two opposing forces of yin and yang, or like the sun and the moon, light and dark, round and curvy versus corners and straight lines. So there are these two opposing yet complementary forces existing within all of nature, therefore within all of us. And maybe it's not an end-all, be-all truth, this ideology, this philosophy, these concepts that we'll talk about today, or maybe it is for you. I personally see it as guidance, a direction, a viewpoint that provides alignment when we become misaligned, when we stray from the path or get out of balance, which manifests in so many different ways: anxiety, depression, or if we're overworked or burnt out or out of the flow. These concepts that we'll talk about today help bring us back into balance, or at least help create some awareness, which is usually the first step, of how our bodies and how nature even works. So thank you for being here and for being open and curious about a topic that has really helped me become more in tune with my mind, my body, with others' behaviors, and having compassion for others' behaviors, understanding where I fit in all of this world, how to navigate it, and ultimately contributing to living my most inspired life. Because So many systems, ways in which we're taught, our everyday life, our daily schedules, all of it is very masculine. And I've had to figure out how to nurture my feminine and set up my own systems that go against so much of what is preached as the norm or how it should be. And the people I often see following those models are often secretly or visibly burnt out because they're going against their natural rhythms and cycles, especially the female body, because we operate on a completely different clock that is not even incorporated or honored or taught or even talked about or passed down to us. A lot of us in the Western society just aren't even, it just isn't a part of our lives. So hopefully today we can really become aware of that within ourselves, within the world, within each other. So to talk about what even are the masculine and feminine energies. So the masculine energy can be seen as traits such as action, logic, structure, assertiveness, ambition, courage, being goal-directed. We see it in straight lines and corners. The masculine is very linear, straightforward, and the masculine's more focused on doing rather than being. And you can see masculine energy is very much in the sun. It's the fire. It's what lights the fire underneath our butt to achieve our goals and get done what we want to get done. Where the feminine energy is seen as intuition, creativity, softness, receptive, slow, emotional, compassionate, nurturing, focusing on relationships and collaboration. The feminine is non-linear. This realization has been one of my most profound realizations, where the feminine, it doesn't always make sense to the logical mind. It doesn't have an exact formula, and it's focused more on being rather than doing. And I love seeing this beautiful dance and support among both the feminine and masculine when we look at our rivers. So if you visualize a river, whatever river comes to your mind, maybe it's a favorite river that you've been to, or just some sudden river that pops up in your mind. So the banks of this river are the masculine. The banks provide the structure. They don't really move. They hold the river. They guide the flow of the river. Where the water itself that fills the space, that fills that structure, this river is the feminine. The flow of the water, the rushing of the water along the banks, sloshing up against the sides and traveling with all the force of gravity and the water's momentum towards wherever the banks are guiding it. So if you took away those banks, you would no longer have a river. Instead, you'd have this water that just splashes all around over the land. It would just go all over without any really direction. And if you took away the water, you would no longer have the river. You would just have this ditch or this thing of rocks. It'd be empty. So it's this dance of these two energies that creates what we call a river. So the masculine holds that structure and space, and the feminine is the radiating love and light that fills that space. Or you can see it in a mountain, where the mountain is the masculine, standing strong and still. It's pointed and jagged, where the wind blowing against it is the feminine. Or if you picture a tall and strong, firmly rooted tree in the forest, that is the masculine, which then allows for a curvy, fluid, feminine vine to wrap around in its spirals and circles up to the sky. And together, these two parts work together. If one is more dominant than the other, maybe it could kill the tree, or maybe the other could not thrive. So it's this constant balance of both of the energies that can be seen all around us and within us. Or our brains are even divided in such a way where the left side can be seen as more masculine, which is logical, uses critical thinking, where the right side of our brain is like the feminine. It's more creative, emotional, and intuitive. And both sides are constantly working together. And cultures throughout the world for thousands of years have provided feminine archetypes or goddesses. Like we see in Hindu culture, there's Shakti, which represents the divine feminine and is responsible for the universe's creation, the maintenance, and destruction. Where Buddhists have Kuan Yin, who absorbs the suffering from all beings. Or in Native American culture, one of my personal favorites, White Buffalo Calf Woman, who comes to the people to remind them of who they were, of their relationship to the Creator, to Mother Earth, to nature itself. Or Christians have Mother Mary and Our Lady of Guadalupe. Or when I lived in Hawaii, they have Pele, the goddess of volcanoes and fire, who helped create the Hawaiian Islands. Or in Norse mythology, there's Freya, who's the goddess of love, beauty, fertility, destiny, and fate, along with battle and hunting. Or in Aphrodite, there's the Greek goddess of love and beauty. Or when I was in Egypt, I learned about Nut, the goddess of the sky, stars, cosmos, of mothers, astronomy. And she was a part of the origin of the universe, and she helps protect the earth. And she also protects the dead until they're reborn in the afterlife. And so with a lot of these stories, you see that they're not only the creators and soft and love and beauty, but they can also be fierce and wrathful. So no matter the religion, the story, the myth, the philosophy, the culture we gravitate towards, these representations of the feminine energy over thousands and thousands of years help put words to our human experience. They help give us guidance. And looking at these archetypes can be powerful ways of activating our power when we are in recovery or on our own unique healing journey. And these archetypes, these models, these energies that are represented often through stories or through nature can help give meaning to our inner worlds. And oftentimes it can help us to get outside of ourselves and to see parts of ourselves in this other archetype that provides some validation or understanding or guidance as to how to navigate this world full of turmoil and beauty and everything in between. Like, that's how I feel when I watch fantasy, mystical movies, or every time I reread Harry Potter. I see parts of myself in all these different characters that are like, wow, it just ignites my heart, and I feel it makes me feel magical and mystical and yeah, validated. Or I see parts of my loved ones, parts of people I don't really like in these other characters that just help give richness and more meaning into this world. So signs that we are overly in our masculine. So the need to constantly be doing things. Busybodies, having trouble resting and just being, having trouble with just being. Overanalyzing and being very much in our minds and not being connected with our bodies and natural rhythm, which can manifest as anxiety or depression, or being overly critical of oneself and others, needing to always be right and asking questions that need a definitive answer, needing an answer and a reason for everything without accepting that some things can't be explained. Being black and white with how we see the world and others by putting things in categories and boxes without seeing the feminine, which is the fluidity and the openness and the nuances that exist between people and situations. I really saw this during COVID. It's just so in the mind what people were saying and what people were arguing about with just this very overly masculine energy. Or also, if we're overly in our masculine, maybe there's the need to prove a point without backing down to the point of where it causes conflict and tension within yourself or the other person. Or giving unsolicited advice, or needing to overly control people and situations. Maybe being overly dominant and aggressive with what we say and how we say it. Maybe if we've been in our masculine or had to be in our masculine for a long time, we can experience burnout from just going so hard at achieving a goal to the point where we ignored our body's needs and didn't take time to rest. Or we might be overly in our masculine if we're avoiding intimacy and vulnerability. Or if we are needing the answer right now and not trusting the process. Like, I have people ask me, what supplement do you take to cure this? Or what herb cures this? And the answer isn't always so direct. Like, there's just this, I feel in other people who are in that go, 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 go. They're like, tell me the answer now. I need it now. And then when I'm like, it's not so clear. It's going to take a while. It's a holistic perspective and I can just see the impatience in those people because that's not what they're used to. And so if you resonate with any of these things, first of all, be gentle with yourself. It's a piece of awareness. There's nothing wrong with being masculine or having predominantly masculine traits. So I'd like to point out that what many people have defined as masculine, or this excess of masculinity that has dominated the planet for the last several hundred years, hasn't been a representation of the divine masculine, like war and domination. These things are ultimately driven by a deep sense of fear and insecurity, and people of all genders and types in the modern world attempt to increase their power and soothe their insecurities by embracing this false masculinity. So this has created kind of this negative view, I think, of the word masculine. And I think that even saying things like toxic masculinity can be detrimental to the masculine expressing itself in its fullness. So the divine masculine, the sacred masculine, the true masculine is grounded and supportive and guiding and practical and logical. It's confident without arrogance. It's rational thinking without the need to overly control. It's honor without the desire for war. And we need this. We absolutely need this. So many of the things I listed are just what happens when we're maybe super in excess of the masculine or haven't had a role model in our lives of what that conscious masculine is. And I think it's so important that we don't put the masculine down by saying things like, ugh, toxic masculinity, or, I think it's good that we don't accept or tolerate certain behaviors. And I also think it's really important that we shift our language and speak positively about positive masculine traits that we want to embody, that in ourselves, that we want to see in others. And I see there's this normalized culture, especially among politics today, where people feel the need to put the other side down in order to rise and put yourself up. So there's kind of this energy, this needing to put down the masculine because things have been so overly masculinized in order to rise the feminine back up. But we can just leave that part out of the equation. We can leave the part out where we put the other side down. We can just state the good part of what we represent. Like, rather than saying men suck and women need to rule the world, we could say something like, I'd like to see more women in power. I think having women in power might help bring balance back to the world. Or like, wow, you're so much more beautiful than my ex-girlfriend. Instead, you can just say, you are so beautiful. We can leave out that part of comparison and putting the other side down. So what can we do? What can you do to plan your life to be in tune with your feminine nature? So at the heart of so much of what I see, at the root of where the feminine, I believe, has been hurt and dishonored, and so many of the ways that the feminine lashes out, is we need to heal our sexual organs. So in yoga, we learn that trauma is often stored in our hips and pelvis and entire womb space if you have a womb. So if we're getting in tune with our feminine, if we're wanting to embrace our feminine, if we're wanting to fall into this receptive openness, softness, while still being grounded, I'd ask, in what ways have you been violated or mistreated in any part of your life that has been stored in this part of our bodies? Or in what ways have we been violated and mistreated in this part of our body? If you have birthed a child, what was that experience like? Was there trauma or incisions made to the body that have been fully processed and realized? Like, C-sections are a major surgery to the body that is often talked about very lightly. Or have you been on any synthetic hormones that control this part of the body, making us out of tune with a natural rhythm that ebbs and flows here each month? Therefore, what are our periods like? If we're in our ovulatory years, what is our relationship like with our period? Are they painful, irregular, too much blood, not enough blood, wild moods? Do we know how many days are in between each cycle? It saddens me how often I get a surprised reaction from other women when I say, I love my period. I love my period. I have truly only met less than a handful of other women in my life that have said the same. So I wonder in what ways we have shut ourselves off to that part of our body. Where can we allow space to honor our monthly bleed? How do we treat ourselves? How do we talk about our period to ourselves and our mind, to others? Or if people are in this season of life of perimenopause or menopause, what is your body telling you during this time? Whether it's hot flashes or mood swings or trouble sleeping or excessive thoughts, what are our orgasms like? So really healing and loving this space in our body, taking your warm hands if they're cold, if you have thyroid issues, if you're just cold in general, if you rub your hands together for a few seconds, creating warmth and heat in between your hands, and you just gently place it in that space just below the navel, just below the belly button, and breathe into that space. How does that feel? So then, kind of piggybacking off of healing our sexual organs, getting to the root of healing and being in tune with our feminine energy is to address the wounds you may have around the feminine energy. And ways I've seen the wounded feminine manifest, ironically, is with the feminist movement. The energy that I've seen from the feminist movement is actually very masculine. And a lot of it hasn't been the conscious masculine. It's been a very angry, yelling, putting down the masculine, calling people out, using aggression to get attention. And maybe this is naturally something that had to happen, or just a natural result from all this pent up hurt that we have. And it came out in this way to help swing the pendulum from being way far over and out of balance in one side. And we had to really bring it back to get this attention. And where I saw this wounded feminine acting out are in things when people say, I don't need a man, I don't need to be protected, I don't need to be taken care of, I don't need you to hold the door open for me. So it's this taking on a fierce independence by thinking, I can do this all on my own. And this often comes from a place of trauma. And where is that trauma rooted and stored in our bodies? Like we talked about earlier, the hips and pelvis, the entire womb space. So I'd also look at, what is your relationship like with other women? How do we feel when we see a woman who's in tune with her sensual side? Do we support this? Do we reject it? What does that say about our sensuality and comfortability with our own bodies? I grew up with my mom saying all the time, we're walking she loves TJ Maxx, when we're in the parking lot of TJ Maxx or wherever she's going, all the errands I'd run with her when I was little, and we'd see other women around, and my mom often would say, if you got it, flaunt it. Or my mom would say, like, dang, I don't have boobs like that, but she looks great, nice. And so I'd like to thank my mom for that, as that being a really beautiful example of how to support and uplift other women. Because the unconscious, the shadow side of the feminine is being jealous or catty of other women. So where can we celebrate women in our lives? Who can you message or reach out to today and tell other women in your life how beautiful they are, how strong they are, how impressed you are by them, how incredible they are, how inspiring, or giving thanks to our mothers for birthing us, whatever it is that we can celebrate and uplift other women, or saying nice job to something that a woman has that you don't, something that you've been wanting to acquire in your life and maybe have some insecurities around or haven't been able to fulfill. And when you see them post or say something online or in person, and you get these feelings of jealousy or insecurity, or why can't I have that? Why don't I have that? Where can we shift that story and honor the feminine in that other person, even when we have our wounds? How can we uplift and celebrate the feminine and just see what happens? Just see the effect that happens. Sometimes people aren't able to receive it. And that's another sign of the wounded feminine, where they aren't able to receive that compliment or that grace or that uplifting. And my perspective is that regardless, giving a compliment, sharing from your heart space, giving love to other people almost never goes wrong. As long as you're staying true to yourself and not overexerting yourself or, losing yourself in your boundaries, you can look at a piece of the feminine and say, wow, you're beautiful. And so another way where the wounded feminine to express itself is when you don't trust your intuition, or the need to over-explain yourself, or if you need an over-analyzed description from someone else in order to believe them. So when someone just tells you about something, but you don't just trust that simple answer that they give you about their bodies, about their experience, or if we have a lack of boundaries and are overly passive, if we're people-pleasing, this all comes from a wounded feminine space, or if we have low self-esteem or insecurity, if we come from a victim mentality, thinking, the world is out to get me, I can't do this because of this, or, that doesn't work for me, that only works for other people, I've been so hurt in the past, therefore I can't heal, or I can't do this, or I can't live my fullest life because I was given this. These are all a place of coming from the victim. And so many of these things, these questions that I bring up, these are hard questions. These are hard pieces of ourselves to look at. Or maybe if you come from a place of low self-esteem, this is what you hear in your head all the time. So where can we love ourselves and give ourselves that love and grace while still taking accountability without being so hard on ourselves, by being able to just recognize, oh wow, I've been really jealous of women. I want to change that. I want to be in a space of expansion rather than contraction. Even notice when your body contracts and closes, when there's gossip or jealousy or cattiness, and then just feel and envision your body expanding and opening when you give a gift, an offering to nature, or celebrating the feminine, dancing and playing and connecting with the smell and beauty of flowers and twirling around with others who are in their feminine, and whatever ways that you see the feminine, being reminded that the feminine is an expansive energy. It's an open energy that you feel in your body. So lean into that. Lean into that expansion. So those two things were maybe the harder parts of working on our feminine, maybe a little heavier, definitely where the inner work is of recognizing, healing our sexual organs and addressing the wounds we have within our own femininity, within others' femininity. So lightening it up a little bit. Maybe you can choose, if you start here, is eating with the cycles. So being able to honor cyclical time over linear time. So the ways that our days are set up are from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever it is, where your peak is in the morning and people kind of drop off in the afternoon. But I notice I don't operate on that clock. I really like slow mornings, and I get my peak later in the day. So I've learned when my natural rhythm is and have designed my life accordingly to that, where the male body gets that peak of testosterone every day, where women in their ovulatory years get that only once or twice a month around ovulation, where we're really, things are clear and we're going after it. So recognizing that and giving yourself some grace that the feminine works in a different rhythm and works in a cyclical, non-linear nature. It's up and down, here and there, curving around, swirling around, a little faster, a little slower, where the masculine's just pretty straightforward, pretty predictable, pretty on time, and about the same every day, very generally speaking. So being able to eat with these cycles, eating seasonally, so being in tune with what grows when in your unique area. So really embracing the strawberries when it's strawberry season, or when it's blueberry season, or connecting with squash and zucchini and pumpkin when it's that time of the year, or connecting more with the cabbage and the onion and garlic in that season of life. So even if it's just one vegetable or one fruit that you really connect with and realize what that cycle is, because right now a lot of us have access to these just all year, all the time. They're traveling, our produce travels from far, far away. We don't even know where it's coming from a lot of the times. And it maybe wasn't even ripe when it was harvested. It got ripened along the truck as it traveled all the way to you. And then you eat it, and its energy is hardly even alive anymore when it wasn't harvested at its peak. So checking out getting more in tune with your farmer's market, talking to your local farmers. It's just pick one farmer you like, see what they grow, see what their methods are, talk to them at the farmer's market, and ask them questions, and just really get in tune with those. And cooking your meals, maybe one meal a week, you focus on eating a seasonal, feminine, in-tune meal that's with the cycles. And going off of also those cycles then is connecting with the moon. So the masculine energy is the sun. The sun rises and sets every day. It's more predictable. It's kind of about the same. Where the moon, the feminine, has these phases. We have the crescent moon, and there's a full moon and a new moon. There's all these different phases of the moon. It's just called the Moon app on my phone, and I check it every day to see what the moon phase is. You can also just go outside and see what the moon phase is, but if you don't, see it in the sky yet, you can check out what phase it is. Just that alone is kind of fun, and I've learned how out of tune I was with the moon. Like the sun, to me, seems so easy when it rises and sets. It's just kind of obvious, but the moon really is on a totally different clock. I didn't realize when the moon rises and sets every day how unique those moon rises and moon set times are. And the app is just a free app called the Moon that shows me that, and that's kind of fun. And I like to see too when my moods, my cycles, how they revolve around the moon, because back in the day, in ancient times, when we didn't have electricity, our cycles were completely controlled by the moon. So women generally would bleed all around the same time, around the new moon. And then all the women would ovulate together around the full moon. The land, the plants, everything is more fertile when the moon is out at night. And then when there's no light with the new moon, that's when we would generally bleed. Or they'd say that it was the medicine women that were actually on the opposite clock, where they would be bleeding with the full moon and ovulating on the new moon because they weren't meant to have babies at that time. So it's just a fun thing to get in tune with your own rhythm, to recognize how the moon affects you when and where in your life. Just standing outside in the moonlight is really special. Just looking at the moon every night, seeing even where it is in the sky before you go to bed. I like doing that. So then that kind of goes into another thing you can do to get in tune and embrace your feminine, is really getting to know your unique cycles and rhythms day to day and monthly, and designing your life accordingly. So even having the awareness, I realize a lot of people don't even know about the phases of our cycle. So we have, some people say there's 3 phases, some say there's 4. I'll go with 4 to make it simple and to really honor each phase. So the beginning of our cycle starts with day 1 of your period. So whenever you bleed, whenever you have your sacred bleed, that's day 1. That's when your monthly cycle begins. So then that period lasts, let's say, 5 to 7 days. Your estrogen then starts to rise. So that's that hormone that helps you go after it. And so then you enter what's called the follicular phase, which is then the next week or so. So now we're on maybe days 7 to 14 of your cycle. So the follicular phase is where it's easier to go after it. Maybe you can run harder or work out faster or get more things done at work. Oftentimes this is when we feel like we want to be more social and open to interacting with other people. And then we hit ovulation. So we can call ovulation one phase. We have period as phase 1, follicular phase 2, and then ovulation being phase 3. That's right around your mid-cycle, and that's when we ovulate and are ready to be impregnated. So what are we impregnating in our lives? What do we want to receive? Any ideas or babies? What do we want to be birthed into our lives? This is a time to really plant the seed, literally. And then after ovulation, we kind of drop down into the 4th phase, the luteal phase, just like Luna, the moon, the luteal phase, kind of the dark side, where this is a really nice time to be gentle with yourself. This is often when the veil is lifted from those first few weeks of going after it, wanting to impregnate ourselves. Maybe our hair gets more full and soft and attractive and wanting to go after things. And then that goes away. The veil gets lifted. Now we sit with ourselves. This is the part where the body gets pregnant and the temperature of the body rises slightly to create space for what needs to be birthed. So I often find myself cleaning my house during this time, creating space to just clear things out. This is a very reflective time for me. This is when difficult emotions can come up. This is where maybe mood swings or cramps, or we're even more hard on ourselves. We get stuck in certain thought patterns a little more. So this is a really nice to honor and recognize sometimes things we ignored during that go-getter phase. Now it comes up for us to see and build off of these insights, these ideas that are showing us what we need to change in our life to create safety in our bodies, to create safety for what needs to be birthed. Because without that safety in the body, birth is going to be a lot more difficult. And so this goes back to honoring our rhythms and the seasons and realizing that rather than always having to be on, always having to produce. So recognizing this cyclical time allows us to be more compassionate with ourselves and with others. And we can let go of feeling the pressure to have to perform on a clock. And then when we release this pressure, it helps us to move with the flow of life and just kind of allow whatever comes up to come up and feel it and let it move through the body. And my biggest thing, I talked about this in my other episode on balancing hormones, is taking my basal body temperature every day, getting a specific thermometer that is able to really track your temperatures accurately, that I sleep with next to my bed every day and wake up, and it's the first thing I do is take that temperature and I sync it with an app. And that I've been doing that for years and years, and so now I have a more predictable, it's not always super predictable because that's how the feminine is, things are constantly fluctuating and changing. This really allows me to plan when I want to do my podcasts, where maybe in the first phase of my cycle, that's a really good time for me to plan the podcast and do the episode, actually record the episode, and then maybe later in my cycle, or maybe in the luteal phase, is a time where I kind of just like to sit and listen and edit. And this often produces a slower result. I've been so in my feminine and honoring and trusting my feminine after the love of my life suddenly passed away. And there's definitely times where I recognize I can use some more masculine energy to help light the fire under my butt to get things done. And I really want to honor and feel and embrace my feminine right now. That's just what so deeply calls to me. And that's a part of the feminine, is trusting that process, even when the answers aren't always so clear, aren't always in front of us right away. So then another way to really honor the feminine, to fall into your feminine, and this is one that I know a lot of people have a hard time with, is to allow yourself to be taken care of by the masculine. Allow yourself to be protected. This can be a trigger for a lot of people. And so really softening into allowing the masculine, if there's someone in your life that it has more of that masculine energy, or maybe you feel it within yourself, that masculine energy, is allowing to be protected, allowing the masculine to feel needed. This is so important for the masculine to thrive. So where in your life, if you have someone who is in their masculine, where can you help them feel needed? Rather than being that strong, independent boss woman that's taking on a lot of that masculine energy, where can we soften and accept and receive being taken care of being protected? And another thing that I've really been enjoying doing while softening into my feminine in the last few years is starting off your sentences with vulnerability. And this has been huge for me ever since Phil passed away, my life partner. I've really been practicing this, of just starting off sentences with vulnerability often. So, like, whatever's in my mind, when I can recognize that something is difficult, or, oh, I'm kind of avoiding something, like, say that. Say that's how you feel. Like saying things like, I feel uncomfortable sharing this, and then share what you need to say. Or, conflict is hard for me, and I really want to address something between us in hopes that it brings us closer, because that's what I need. I need to feel close to you. So those can be scary things to say, and I bet that other person will love hearing that. If we've created safety in our bodies and in our relationships, that statement will be well received. And if it's not well received, that is a sign of something that needs to be addressed. And then ultimately, what I've talked about too, of really softening into our feminine, is supporting the masculine. We need to support the masculine by not putting the masculine down. Like I mentioned, how I personally think terms like toxic masculinity can be really detrimental to the masculine psyche. So how can we celebrate the masculine? How can we talk up the masculine? How can we love parts of the masculine and bring masculine into balance in our own bodies, in our relationships with others, in the workplace, throughout our whole lives, our family systems, our communities? Where can we celebrate these aspects of the conscious masculine? So maybe we pick one of these things, or maybe we address a few more in our lives to help us embody our true feminine, which brings a deep wisdom rooted in trusting one's intuition and heart. It is a passionate, creating, and life-giving force. And the true feminine supports deep, heartfelt nurturing of all creation. Where can we be receptive and surrender, go with the flow, allowing the cycles, embracing the darkness? like how the moon doesn't technically have its own source of light. Instead it's reflecting the light of the sun. So how can we receive the light from the sun and reflect it back? And by being in our feminine, by softening into our feminine, by embracing our feminine, we can show love and respect to all people and cultures, regardless of the things that make us different, because we don't feel threatened by others or try to control them. So instead, we value the contribution that each individual brings into the world. So thank you so much for listening to this. I would really love to hear your experience with listening to this podcast. I would love to hear how integrating these concepts into your life goes. You can follow me on Instagram at Abby Lee Wellness. You can email me and sign up for a coaching call, abbyleewellness@gmail.com. And I really love receiving insights, and I like to share them on Instagram, what people say. So best of luck in embracing the beauty and the softness and the femininity inside of you and in others. And I will see you next time.